The Arizona Cardinals finished the 2022 season with a 4-13 record and missed the playoffs for the third time in the Cliff Kingsbury era. Cliff became the head coach back in 2019 when this franchise had the number 1 overall pick, and a pick they would eventually use on Oklahoma quarterback Kyler Murray. Cliff was known for his success on offense at the collegiate level, as he had a quarterback throw for over 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns during his time at Texas Tech by the name of Patrick Mahomes. And as we know now, the Cliff Kingsbury experiment did not go according to plan, and insert former Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon as the new head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. And unfortunately for Gannon and the Cardinals, Kyler Murray tore his ACL late in the 2022 season, and they knew when they took this job that 2023 was going to be an extreme learning experience for them, because as you guys can probably guess by the nature of the team previews, we're not going to go out and make some wild prediction and say that if the cards fall their way, the Cardinals can make a deep postseason run this year. Not quite, but based on what we've seen so far from the Cardinals in the Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ozenfort era, I really like their future. And for as bad as 2023 probably will be for this team, the future will be worth it. And we're going to dive into what to expect, who to watch, and everything in between with the 2023 Cardinals in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing some of the bright spots on the Cardinals roster, and believe it or not, it's their offensive line. Left tackle DJ Humphries is quietly a very good left tackle, and before the 2022 season began, DJ was signed to a 3-year deal through the 2025 season, and that's key because whether the starting quarterback in 2024 is Kyler Murray or someone else, having stability at one of the most important positions in football for any quarterback is vital. And I really liked what the Cardinals did in the 2023 draft this year by trading back with the Texans and then trading back up with the Lions to add another piece on their offensive line in Paris Johnson Jr. And one thing that I will emphasize quite a bit throughout the Cardinals preview is the NFL is a copycat league, and when Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ozenfort are constructing this roster with the long-term vision in mind, think about where they come from and what they witnessed firsthand over the past few years. In Jonathan's case, he saw a dominant offensive line, and in Monty's case, especially in 2022, he saw Dennis Daly get beat time and time again after Taylor Lewan went down last year. And having said that, the Cardinals' rebuild is not going to be a one-year turnaround. So for them to draft a franchise tackle with their first pick, along with getting the Texans' first-round pick next year, is something I love, and I thought the Cardinals were very big winners from the 2023 draft. And they even got a Texans 3rd-round pick and Titans 3rd-round pick next year too, as they traded back at the start of the 2nd round, and the Cardinals are going to enter the 2024 draft with 6 top 100 picks, which is critical for a rebuilding team. But what's also important to remember is they did not just throw away the 2023 draft to get more picks for next year. Paris Johnson and BJ Ojulari were 2 of my favorite prospects in the draft, and especially BJ, who I think will be a very good pass rusher over the course of his career. But pertaining to 2023 specifically, it's going to be difficult to seriously compete anytime your starting quarterback goes down and is expected to miss most of the season. And on top of it for Arizona, losing players like Zach Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, and Byron Murphy in free agency, all good starting players from last year, is going to make it extremely difficult to replace those guys. It's inevitable, and expecting a 37-year-old Colt McCoy to come in and throw for 4,500 yards with Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, and Greg Dortch as his top 3 receivers is, well, unrealistic. But one thing I do expect Jonathan Gannon to implement, maybe not necessarily as much in 2023, but definitely in 2024 and beyond once him and Monty get their guys fully on the roster, is I expect the Cardinals to heavily emphasize pass rush and to eventually be one of the better pass rushing units in all of football. Granted, we are at least a full year away from that, but Arizona had 36 sacks as a team in 2022, which put them tied for 23rd. J.J. Watt had 12.5 of those 36, and Zach Allen, who is now a Bronco, had 5.5, so right there is half of the team's production in sacks that have to be replaced from a year ago. And if you are not aware and are just getting back into football, JJ Watt retired this offseason. And that's another big thing that has to be remembered for the Cardinals in 2023, is they're not just a rebuilding football team. They lost a lot of players from last year to this year on what was already a 4-win team in 2022. And on top of it, one of their better players in Budda Baker wants to be traded, so in terms of rebuilding a team, I don't think there's a steeper hill to climb than what the Cardinals have ahead of them. And to be clear on one thing, while I don't think they're going to go 0-17 in 2023, they are my favorite to finish with the worst record and have the #1 overall pick in the 2024 draft, which would land them USC's Caleb Williams. But what honestly throws the Cardinals' preview for this season off is we don't know how long Kyler Murray is going to be out for. He injured his knee on December 12th last year and had surgery on January 3rd of 2023. And what throws the preview off is having Colt McCoy be his backup, whose playing style is, well, absolutely nowhere near Kyler's. And Kyler, in a lot of ways, is a one-of-one player because of not just how straight-line fast he is, but because of how uber athletic he is, and agile too for that matter, so it's not as simple as signing a quarterback with scrambling abilities and expecting them to emulate Kyler. But what we will try and explain here for the next part of the video is what personnel groupings they will have in 2023, and what their goals will be offensively. I know it's easy to look at Zach Ertz's numbers, and given the fact he's in his early 30s now, and basically say, well, he went to Arizona and is now washed up. But Ertz still gets open at a very good rate, and the tape shows that. And not only do they have Zach Ertz, but they also have invested a second-round pick in 2022 tight end Trey McBride, who had 29 receptions for 265 receiving yards in his rookie season. And the reason we bring both tight ends up is because they want to have both of these guys on the field at the same time, and quite often at that. And at some point, I would imagine they kind of hand the reins over from Ertz to McBride, or at least that should be a goal of the Cardinals entering the 2023 season. They ran 12 personnel last year at a rate of 30%, which ranked 10th in the NFL. 12 personnel is 1 running back and 2 tight ends, and they ran 11 personnel at a rate of 60% last year, which is 1 running back and 1 tight end. And what I think the Cardinals will do, especially early on with Colt McCoy, is run 12 personnel at one of the higher rates in the league, because they will do everything they can, at least I would hope, to make Colt McCoy's job as easy as they can. And this is not groundbreaking news here, but Colt will be 37 years old at the start of the regular season, and even when Colt was in his physical prime, his arm was never the strongest. It was not elite 10 years ago, and it's certainly not elite now. So the deep balls to Rondale Moore or Marquise Brown are not going to be there early in the year. And this is where 12 personnel comes into play in a big way, and I think we can see an actual emergence from Trey McBride in his second season, and I think there's a chance he has over 500 yards receiving this year, which would be a pretty substantial jump for him, and a pretty remarkable season when you factor everything that's going against McBride entering 2023. The Cardinals' defense also finished 31st in points per game allowed last year, and unfortunately I don't think that's going to change much this year, as the roster is not great on that side of the ball. Offensively, when they have Kyler, they'll at least be able to hang with some teams, but I would ask anybody watching, how many Cardinals defensive starters could you name entering the 2023 season? The answer is probably 2 or 3, with them being Budda Baker, Isaiah Simmons, and maybe Zaven Collins. And their starting corners entering the season are Antonio Hamilton and Marco Wilson, and while I did like the selections of corners Garrett Williams and Keitrell Clark in the draft this past year, and think they could be very good developmental players, I would not advise any team to start the year with a pair of 3rd and 6th round corners entering any season. Now, they could and should get a lot of playing time down the stretch of the 2023 season, but entering this year, the Cardinals are going to be tested by both Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson in Week 1, then come home and play the Giants in Week 2, then the Cowboys in Week 3. And 3 straight games against the NFC East will be a test for Gannon's Cardinals, but the positive thing to remember here is these are teams Gannon game planned against a total of 7 times last year, 2 times each in the regular season, and once, of course, with the Giants in the postseason. He knows their tendencies better than anyone, and the one thing that will benefit the Cardinals this year is they have nothing to lose entering every single week. They hear the noise. They hear how bad everyone is expecting them to play this year, and if you've worked at something your entire life, like all of the guys in this building have, with blood, sweat, and tears, and you're still hearing that you're going to get smoked by double digits every game, or it wouldn't be surprising at all if you did, well, that's going to piss everyone off in that locker room. And I think the Cardinals are a team this year where you're going to want to put them away early, because the longer the game goes, meaning the longer it's competitive, the more it benefits Arizona, because opposing teams are going to press and essentially start to think, we do not want to lose to them when this was a circled game at the beginning of the year of one we would surely win. And as cliche as this is going to sound, the Cardinals are going to be a young and hungry team this year, and if anyone remembers the Raheem Morris Buccaneer days, he actually coined this phrase, youngry. But that's going to be the Cardinals entering every single game. Down but not out, and especially when Kyler comes back. And there seems to be this belief that even when Kyler comes back, that the Cardinals are going to still just roll over, and that's not the case. While no one wants to hear about moral victories, they only lost to the Eagles last year by 3 points, while losing the turnover margin, and they only lost to the Chargers last year by a single point, again while losing the turnover margin this time by 2. And when a team goes 4-13, you typically do not do that by accident, so it should not come as a surprise that the Cardinals had a negative turnover difference last year with a -5 margin. And if they clean up their turnovers this year, it's pretty simple. They're going to be in a lot more games. And generally speaking here for a minute, and of course we can do this with every team, but specifically looking at the Chargers, Bucks, and Falcons losses, combined in those games, Arizona had a -3 turnover margin, yet lost those 3 games by 5 total points. And granted, Trace McSorley and David Blau started 2 of those games, and again, we can do this with every team, but if they win those 3 games, we're talking about a team that finished the year with a 7-10 record that still had a lot going against them. Now, you can't excuse giving up 44 points to the Chiefs and losing to the division rival Niners by 25 and 28 points in the games you played against them last year, but the narrative that this team is going to fold week after week after week is one I'm not buying. And while I think they will finish with a less than 500 record, I think the Cardinals will be a lot more competitive than people realize. Like every rebuilding team, yes, they're going to have their occasional games where they get blown out of the water, and during weeks 3 through 5, when they play Dallas, San Francisco, and Cincy in consecutive weeks, well, if they get down early, especially to Cincy, this game could be over by the middle of the third quarter. And like how we discussed earlier with Jonathan Gannon and Monty trying to implement their philosophy, as the NFL is a copycat league, the Cardinals finished 20th in rushing attempts last year and 20th in yards per carry. And while it probably will be below average again this year, meaning 17th or worse, this is something over the next few years I expect to gradually creep up. Remember, Jonathan Gannon, of course, came from Philly, and Monty Ozenfort came from Tennessee, and both of those franchises love to run the football, and they want to be the bullies in the ground game and not the ones getting bullied. And the first pick of the marriage between Gannon and Ozenfort was an offensive lineman. 2023 will probably be the worst year for the Cardinals out of the next 3 or 4 years, but one thing you'll see this year is groundwork for what will transpire over the next few years. The team MVP, breakout player, ceiling, and floor are on the screen, and I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as only about 23% of people watching are subscribed, and it makes a massive difference. Until the next preview, please be safe, and have a great day. Love you guys.